All right. Welcome to week 2 of Selling on Purpose for those people who are listening to the recording. Michael, welcome, man. It's going to be me and you on the live call, and I appreciate you coming to the live call. I know it's hard for some people to make it happen, especially at night. You just want to go and do whatever you want to do.
Well, I'm happy to be here, man.
Cool, dude. So tell me, what kind of takeaways did you have from last week?
The big thing was that preparedness trio thing.
Yeah.
I forget the exact name you called it, but that thing made a lot of sense, and I actually had a chance to use it a couple of times, and doing some calls. I had one last week and one this week. Definitely feel like it helped me kind of prepare my mentally for the call, and I think I probably had a better outcome because of it. So
good. Yeah. Well, this week I want to give you some actual tools to use on the call, right? So last week, what we talked about is really how you're going to get yourself mentally conditioned before the call, as well as we laid kind of the baseline understanding of what is decision making, what is persuasion, how do people actually make decisions. So we've laid all of that stuff out last week. So what I want to do this week is really to start laying the foundation for how are we going to prepare for calls in terms of the specific things that we're going to tell people in advance of calls to get them prepared, as well as we're going to work through a process tonight of how I write questions, right? So one of the biggest topics for people is generally, what questions do I ask? How do I ask them? What sequence do I ask them with? And I've got a method that will help you get a list of questions that are going to be able to truly expose what's going on in your prospects, or in your case, Michael, if you're doing idea extraction, truly be able to ask great questions of people. So let me pull up the slideshow here. That's not it. Okay. Got to share my screen. All right. Michael, same deal. If you'll mute yourself, that way we just make sure the recording is top quality. And then since I'm going to be looking at the slides as I'm presenting, if you need anything live during the call, feel free to just unmute yourself and stop me. But if I'm not going to be able to see the chat because I'm going to minimize that part of it. So if you need anything, you have any questions, you absolutely just let me know. Cool? Cool. All right. Okay. So do me a quick favor, Michael, and just unmute yourself for 1 second and confirm for me that you're seeing the screen that we're on.
Yes, I'm seeing it.
All right, awesome. So welcome everybody to week 2 of Selling on Purpose. The things that we're going to be focusing on this week are agenda management, are the most powerful questions that you can ask, and we're actually going to be covering some topics that are a little bit advanced, but I wanted to expose you guys to these, right? So again, what we're going to be doing this week, we've laid the foundation last week of what it actually means to sell. We've learned that you can't actually convince anyone of anything. You can only walk them through a decision-making process and help them see things for themselves. So in week 2, we're adding on our second layer. Okay, the second layer is, how do we tell that prospect what to expect out of our interaction? So we're going to go through the process of setting valid agendas. And agendas are probably not what you're thinking they are. So we're going to get into depth on that. Then we're going to talk through the methodology of how do you go through a process to find out the most powerful questions that you can ask your prospects based specifically on what it is that you sell, right? So if you're selling software services, if you're working on idea extraction, if you're selling consulting services, if you're selling a physical product, this process works for all of them, All right, so we're going to learn how to set the agenda so that our prospects and us both understand what to expect out of a call so that we can invest our most valuable resource, our time, as wisely as possible. I'm going to walk you through a simple process that I've developed of exactly how you can get to the questions that you must be asking your prospects. And then we're going to talk about a few more advanced psychological principles like baggage and strip lining that, again, this is going to be something that you don't just understand in theory, but things that I want you to be able to take and implement immediately after you get off the call or after you listen to the recording. Just like last week, I want you guys to take notes, or I invite you guys to take notes. When you take notes with a pen on paper, you're making new neurological connections in your brain. So you're actually learning and integrating this information. So just like last week, I encourage you to take notes. And then the other thing that I'll encourage you to do is, just like last week, I've created a form for you guys to go through and fill out immediately after the call or immediately after you listen to the recording. Okay. And again, the reason that I do that and the reason that I ask you to fill it out right after you listen to the recording or right after you're on the call is because when you immediately learn new information and then process it right after you've learned it, you're forming those new neurological connections in your brain. Okay. So it's a little form. It's like 4 or 5 different things that I'd like you to fill out. Spend no more than 10 minutes on it. I'll drop the link for the folks that are on the call in the chat. And then for those of you guys that are listening to the recording, I'll get you that form as well. So let's blast off. So what I actually want to talk about first is managing your neediness. Okay, so this is actually another layer to the psychological preparation that takes place before any call. But more importantly, this is something that you're going to have during the call. Okay, so what actually happens when you are feeling needy? Okay, you've probably heard that before. You've probably been exposed to this before. Have you ever interacted with someone who is a salesperson or someone who is trying to convince you of something, and you could actually feel their neediness? You could feel that they wanted you to say yes, right? You feel that they wanted you to say yes. You feel that they need your money, that they desperately want your money. And I want you to ask yourself the question, how does that make you feel? If you feel that someone who is selling to you is being or acting needy, how does that make you feel? For me, it makes me feel like I want to run in the opposite direction. If I smell desperation or neediness on someone who's communicating with me, I automatically think that they don't have my best interest at heart. Because if someone is needy, what they're actually telling me is they care more about themselves than they care about getting a right outcome from me. So why does neediness happen? So essentially, our brain is millions of years old, and the amygdala is our fear brain, right? And our fear brain is a biological holdover since we evolved from lesser species, right? So the original iteration of our human brain, it didn't have all the cognitive capacity that it had right now. So literally the very first iteration of our brains were a lizard brain. And our lizard brain is our amygdala. And this lizard brain essentially just manages critical reactions in your body. It's the fight or flight response managed by something like the amygdala, where it doesn't process deep learning and it doesn't process deep thinking. It's that thing that causes you to run away if you see something scary. But since it's a holdover, our lizard brain is often telling us things that they're scary or that they're needy when it's not actually biologically dangerous to us anymore. So what I want to remind you guys is when you say you need a sale, what you're telling your brain is that you need a sale. And the only thing that you actually need is food, water, air, and shelter. So this is just another layer of the psychological preparation of sales where you don't need anything except to meet your biological needs in life. And when you say that you need something, you're sending signals to your brain that are actually saying, this is dangerous, I might die. So we do not want to operate in a needy way in our sales calls because that means we're focusing on ourselves rather than our prospect. And the way that we can focus on our prospect and not on ourselves is, number one, the prepared purpose trio that we learned last week. So you do that before every interaction. Okay. The second way is to watch the language you use with yourself. You don't need any sale. You can want a sale. So another tool where we're effectively managing what we need in our brain. Last layer of psychological preparation here, it's the concept of Shoshin. Shoshin is a Zen Buddhist concept that literally is translated to beginner's mind, right? So in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert mind, there are few. The reason that I'm bringing this up is because I speak with hundreds and thousands of people per year as they're preparing for different sorts of sales interactions, right? And they always kind of tell me what they're predicting the other person is going to do or say. So can you imagine how difficult it is if you're preparing for your interaction based on guesses of what the other person will do or say? So here's the important thing. You do not need to guess or predict what anyone is going to say. You're going into these interactions with the concept of beginner's mind. There's no guessing, there's no speculating, there's no trying to predict. What we're doing here is we're going to learn a system of asking the right questions to get the information that we need, right? So we're going in without neediness because we don't want to have that stinky desperation cologne on us that people can feel. And then we're going into it with a beginner's mind. And the beginner's mind reminds us that we don't guess, we don't speculate, we don't predict, we ask the questions that we need the answers to. There's a thing called the value perception trap. This is going along with the concepts of Shoshin. And there's this concept called theory of mind. Theory of mind is the human's inclination to try and predict things about someone else. So do you guys know the whole deal with Sam Walton, the guy who founded Walmart, who's a multi-billionaire, was a multi-billionaire? Sam Walton drove the exact same 30-year-old pickup truck even after he was already a billionaire, right? So if you went into an interaction with Sam Walton and you guessed based on the fact that he was driving a 30-year-old pickup, if you went into that interaction guessing that he was going to be on the lower end of what you offer or that he wasn't going to be able to afford what you're offering, you would have missed a massive opportunity. Okay, so the theory of mind thing and the value perception trap is this. You don't guess, you don't speculate, you don't wonder, you stop and you execute. Okay. So this is going to be the foundation. The saying and hearing no is the foundation of what we're going to build agendas on. So most people, and when you're kind of thinking about sales, you guys, you're probably thinking that you just want to start getting people to say yes. If someone feels that you are operating in a way that's just trying to get them to say yes, what they're going to do is they're actually going to feel more uncomfortable. Right? So are you guys are all with me on the recording, and Michael, essentially stringing yeses together doesn't actually work in one-on-one sales interactions for the simple reason that you might get a yes, but that yes isn't going to be valid because you've essentially manipulated and pressured someone into saying yes. And what happens when someone is manipulated or pressured into saying yes? They'll tell you yes to your face, get off of the interaction with you. The next morning, you're going to have a nice email in your email inbox letting you know, for whatever reason, they would like to get a refund. So one of the principles of this system that I've developed is that you're going to give people the opportunity to say no. And you're going to give them the human equivalent of a squeeze page, right? Where the purpose of every interaction, right, as we know from our prepared purpose trio, is to ultimately ask questions, listen intently, and guide people through a decision-making process. But because time is the most valuable non-renewable resource on the planet, we want to make sure that for our sake and our prospects' sake, we're investing our time in opportunities to move ourselves or our prospects' business forward, which is why the basis of every interaction must have a valid agenda. And don't worry, I'm going to tell you guys exactly how I do that stuff in a little bit. but a valid agenda exists so that whenever you're getting on a call with a prospect in any sort of a sales interaction, you want to let them know very clearly that the result of this call, and at the end of this call, you'd like to understand one of two things from them. You'd like to understand, yes, they'd like to move forward with the conversation. So if you're doing idea extraction, you're obviously not trying to get some sort of agreement on a sale. If you're doing idea extraction, the possible takeaway from the call would be that at the end of the call, I would just like to let you know one of two things. I'd like you to let me know, yes, you'd be interested in hearing more of the research that you hear from other people you're doing idea extraction on, right? So we can keep the process open, keep the lines of the communication open. Or you can let me know, no, I don't want to continue down that path. Or if you're selling something, no, I don't think that that's the right product for me. And what I always tell people is that yes or no is a valid answer. And no is something that you can let me know, Mr. Prospect. If you feel for whatever reason like you don't want to move forward in this process, you can tell me no, and we'll part as friends. So what we're doing here is we're creating a situation in our prospect's mind where they feel totally comfortable being honest with us, because we've said, you can tell me yes, you can tell me no. And if you tell me no, I'm going to respect that from you, and we're going to continue to be friends, or we're going to continue to be friendly. I'm not going to overreact. I'm not going to protest. I'm not going to beg you to do something. Okay, so we're setting the frame for this idea of creating an agenda. So what is a valid agenda? A valid agenda is something that you put into place for every single sales interaction that you've got. And it helps you manage your emotions, which is key, because decision-making, ultimately, as we learned last week again, is made 100% emotionally. So here is the anatomy of a valid agenda. Okay, this is something that you're going to either get the prospect to agree to before that interaction, right? So if you're trading in emails and setting up the conversation, you can set this agenda in those emails. If for whatever reason you haven't set the agenda in those emails, this is something that you can let them know in the first 5 minutes of the conversation. And I've got an example of this for you guys, so don't worry about it. But here's the anatomy of a valid agenda. Okay, and a valid agenda lets you know a few things. It tells you first what you want, what will happen in the interaction, what will happen next, and then understanding the buying process and the reasonable next steps. Okay, so here's a quick example of what something might look like. Okay, so here's what I want. What I want is that I would like to have this call, Mr. Prospect, and I'd like to ask you some questions and really listen intently to the problems that you've got going on in your business, right? So what I propose is that at the end of this conversation, you let me know one of two things. If you like what we've talked about, you can let me know yes, and we can move forward, and I can share the cost details of how we could work together. Or you can let me know, no, I've enjoyed our conversation, but I don't think I'd like to move forward at this time, and we can part as friends. Does that sound fair? Right, so you can see I've told them what I want. I told them I want to have a conversation. I told them I wanted to ask some questions. I told them that I wanted to listen. So I've told them what they want, and I told them what will happen in the interaction, and then I've let them know what will happen next, right? Next meaning we're going to either move forward or we're going to move on. Right, so I'll say that again so you guys can take some notes, because I want to give you the example of this agenda. Right, so here's what I see for our call, Mr. Prospect. What I would like to do is ask you some questions and really listen to the kind of challenges that you're facing in your business. Okay, if as a result of hearing those challenges, right, I hear something that I can help with or have helped other people with in the past, I'll describe to you my proposed solution. All I ask is that at the end of our conversation, you let me know one of two things. You either let me know, yes, you like what we talked about and you'd like to move forward, or you can let me know, no, now's not the right time for something like this, no thanks, and we can part as friends. Does that sound fair? right? So what we're doing is we're getting them to agree either in advance of this call, right in the emails that we're setting up, or we're delivering this in the first 5 minutes of the call. The reason for this is that we want to spend our valuable time with people who understand that life is about a series of decisions. And most people, they need you to help them make a decision, right? If you don't give them a way to make a decision or a time frame to make a decision in, most people will never make a decision. So what we're doing is we're leveraging this idea of Parkinson's law. Parkinson's law says that a task or a decision-making process will ultimately expand to fill whatever size container you give it. Okay? So if you told them, look, I just want you to make a decision on this in the next month, it's going to take them a month. If you said, I want you to make a decision on this in the next 3 months, it's going to take them 3 months. Here's the thing that most people don't realize. If you don't give them a time frame for making a decision, chances are they're never going to make a decision. It's the reason why many of you guys might be endlessly chasing prospects who said they were interested, you felt like you had a good call with them, but then they disappear and you never hear from them again. So this setting valid agendas prevents that as much as possible. You're letting them know, look, we're going to have this interaction, and at the end of the interaction, I want to know very clearly, would you like to move forward or would you like to not move forward? Both answers are totally valid, but I'd like for you to give me that answer. And again, what some people might be thinking at this point is, Frank, aren't I going to get a lot of no's? Or won't people, if I try and set that agenda before the conversation, won't most people say, no, I don't want to do that? Here's the interesting thing. They won't say that. Or if they do say that, you'll have a backup agenda in place, right? So if they say, no, Frank, no, Vladi, no, Katya, no, Ani, no, Michael, right? If they say, no, I'm not going to make a decision at the end of this call, that's okay because you just do a backup, right? So you say, hey, here's what's going to happen. We're going to ask some questions, go through this process. At the end of the interaction, you'll let me know one of two things. Either yes, you'd like to move forward, or no, you don't want to move forward, and that's okay, we'll part as friends. And if they say, Frank, I'm going to have to talk to my business partner, so I can't give you a yes or no in this call. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a backup agenda, right, where we're still going to ask them for some sort of a decision, just in a different way. So if they say, Frank, I can't make a decision on this particular call because I have to talk to my business partner, you just go with a backup option where you say, that's okay. I totally understand you've got to talk with a business owner or you've got to talk with your business partner. Why don't we do this? We'll have our call. Then you can spend a day or two communicating that information to your business partner. And then here's what we'll do. Right, in 2 days, after you've had an opportunity to talk with your business partner, why don't you and I just jump on a 15-minute call, and then on that 15-minute call 2 days from now, you let me know one of two things. You let me know, yes, you'd like to move forward, or you let me know, no, this isn't the right thing for us and we'll part as friends. So I hope you guys can see that moving people through a sales process is about giving them a series of decisions to make. And the reason that sales processes get out of control is because you stop setting agendas. So people start disappearing on you. You don't know whether or not they want to interact with you. So you kind of just end up chasing all of these loose ends. So the reason that we set agendas is because we don't chase loose ends. We get people to either say yes to us or say no to us, so that way we can move on to people who we can actually help, and they can move on, if they're a no, to something else that might serve them better. So I just talked about this a little bit, but I always encourage people to have a plan A and a plan B in place. Okay, so you can come in with your agenda where agenda A is you want them to make a decision at the end of the call. If they say no to that, that's no problem. You've got plan B, right? Plan B is maybe you're going to talk to them again in 2 days or 3 days, and then at that call, they're going to let you know whether or not they'd like to move forward. So agendas have power because they ensure that you're having conversations that matter, and you're ensuring that you're having conversations with people who are going to make a decision, right? So you get the opportunity to be in more conversations where your prospects understand that there's a decision to be made, right? So you're going to definitely end up getting more yeses because people are in the decision-making box. But interestingly enough, you're probably going to hear more no's, and that's actually a good thing. Because when you hear a clear no from someone, you're not going to waste a week, a month, 3 months chasing them down, spending your emotional energy on them, wondering what happened. You're going to very clearly know they're a no, so I get to move on to another prospect who I can help better. Okay, so that is setting a valid agenda. My recommendation to you guys is that you set an agenda for every single interaction that you're going into. And again, Michael or Vladi, if you guys are doing idea extraction, the agenda can be something like, hey, I want to have a conversation. I want to learn more about your pain points. And really, I don't have anything to sell you. So at the end of the conversation, I'd like to know whether or not you'd like me to keep in touch and share more with you about what I learned from other people in your industry. Or, right, you can let me know, no, I'm good with this conversation and I wouldn't like any follow-up, right? But you can use an agenda in every single interaction. And if you're doing idea extraction, and if you use these agendas, you can actually get their permission to keep in touch on the other interactions that you've got, which once you get to the pre-selling process is going to be huge, right? Because now you're actually going to have a list of 10, 15, 20 people who have told you they want to keep in touch and understand the results of the conversations. So now when you're going back to pre-sell, you've got a list of prospects who you've been in touch with who have agreed to continue in the process rather than somebody you just talked to 2 months ago and you never interacted with them again. All right, so I want to talk now about building your list of questions. Okay, so I want you all to be able to go into an interaction with a list of possible questions that you're going to answer. I used to make the mistake of winging it on every single call. Okay, I went into every single call and I told myself, you're just going to figure out in the moment what to say. You're just going to do it. You're going to say whatever you think you should say in that moment. Or I told myself, the questions will come organically. So I've done that. I did that for about 3 years while I was working a full-time sales job. And I'll just tell you this, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes you're certainly on and you end up asking good questions. But a lot of the times, if you go into it with no real idea of what you're going to ask them, you pretty much don't ask the most powerful questions that are available to you. So here's what I like to do, and this is an exercise that everyone should run to, okay, or everyone should run through. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to walk through a process of how do you actually know what questions to ask, right? So I've got a step-by-step process that's pretty simple where you're going to walk through it and then you're going to build a list of questions about your particular product or service. And again, if you're doing idea extraction, that's okay, right? You're just going to have to kind of take a step back and make some guesses about what the possible product can be, or you're going to actually be able to follow a different process, and I can tell you guys a little bit about that off of this recording, but I want to make sure that you guys are totally clear on how to build your list of questions. So the first step in building your list of questions is to consider and list out every single feature of your product. Okay, a feature is a characteristic of your product, meaning a feature of your product is you give 5 design changes, right? Or a feature of this particular selling course is 5 sessions. A feature of this particular course is each session is about an hour. A feature of this particular course is that you've got unlimited opportunity to interact with Frank over email and Facebook to get any questions asked or answered, right? So those are features. Then what you're going to do is you're going to write a benefit statement for every single feature, right? So if a feature of this course is that you get to interact with Frank and you get to ask Frank any questions via Facebook or email an unlimited amount of times throughout the course, right? If that's the feature, what's the benefit? Well, the benefit of that particular feature is that you have unlimited opportunity to get better at sales, right? Or really, maybe a better benefit statement to the fact that you get unlimited access to Frank is the benefit to unlimited access to Frank is that you are guaranteed to be able to implement this sales system because you have no reason not to understand everything, right? So the benefit to the fact that you get unlimited access to Frank is that you can make damn well certain that you're going to be able to understand what's going on, right? So the benefit to that, again, if I keep asking myself, so what, I can get to a root level. Okay, so overall, we list a feature of our product, right? A feature is unlimited access to Frank. Then we list a benefit of that particular feature. And then the way that we understand if we're at the deepest root level of that benefit is we ask ourselves, so what? So let's take my example, right? The feature is unlimited access to Frank for questions. A benefit to that is you get to make absolute certain that you are implementing this new thing that you're learning and this new thing that you paid money for. Well, so what, right? So what is the benefit to being able to be certain that you're going to implement this? Well, if I ask myself, so what? Well, so what means I actually will be able to sell more effectively. So what? Well, if I can sell more effectively, then I can get more of what I want out of life, right? So that might not be the greatest example, but I'm brainstorming here to see you got to show you guys how I go through this. So write a feature, write the associated benefit, and the way that you know that that's the right benefit is that you say, so what about the benefit, right? So what? And if you can keep going down that path, you're going to get yourself to the root benefit level. Okay, now here's what we're actually going to do with that. So we've listed a feature, we've listed a benefit, we've asked ourselves, so what? That way we can understand if we're at the root level of the benefit, and then we write a question that exposes whether or not that benefit is important to a client. Okay, everyone with me? So feature, benefit, you ask yourself, so what? And then as a result of that, so what, you write a question that exposes whether or not that benefit is important to a client, right? So if the benefit is that you get to immediately build your sales knowledge because you have unlimited access to Frank, which means you get to implement this stuff, right? What might a question about that be? So what I'm going to do for you guys is I'm going to actually send you a list of all the stuff that I'm talking about. All right, so I've actually compiled a list for you of these questions with feature, benefit, so what, and then the questions that I actually built around them. Right, so I want you guys to understand the process, and then I'm going to send you all of these examples, but I don't want to give you the examples right now because I want you to work up the mental sweat of kind of kicking this around in your own brain. And believe me, you're going to build up a little bit of a mental sweat kicking this around in your own brain. But don't worry, I want you to think about it a little bit, then I'm going to send you the document. When you see the document, you're going to say, aha, I see how easy it actually is. And then this is a little hack that I've developed. You create a list of the success stories that you've had, if you've had success stories, and then you mix those powerful stories with the best questions. Again, that's going to make sense to you more, but I want you guys to start considering this deeply. I want you to wrestle with it a little bit, right? I want you to say, what does Frank mean? And what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you fill out that form, so you're going to build up that mental sweat because I want you guys to do some of the work of thinking and considering this, and then I'm going to send you the answer sheet, and then once you see that, right, you're going to be able to look at the questions that you've built against the questions that I've built and know whether or not you've got to make some changes. I put this in here just because I didn't want to leave anybody behind, right? So I'm going to send you some of these, but here is an example because I can feel that you guys are wondering, what the hell are you talking about? So a feature, right, is a website is completed in 3 months. A benefit of a website being completed in 3 months is that you get to see a big ROI on dollars quickly invested, right? So feature, website's done in 3 months. Benefits, you get to see ROI on that quickly. And this is actually assuming, I built these around an old company that I worked for back in the day where we built websites for the government, and a typical website build took 6 months. So that's why you're actually seeing that it's a feature that the website is completed in 3 months, and a benefit is that you get an ROI on it quickly. Because in this instance, 3 months is fast. Second example is a feature is a winner of multiple design awards for our clients, right? That company won multiple design awards for the clients that we worked with. That's a feature. A benefit of that particular thing is that design award winners are perceived as more effective and professional, so therefore there's a higher conversion rate on your sales. So this right here is an example of the so what language. So remember, the way we're getting to these questions is we're saying, number one, what's the feature? The feature is winner of multiple design awards. Then we're saying the benefit. Well, what's the benefit of multiple design awards? Well, design awards are perceived as more effective and professional. And then I'm asking myself the question, so what? So what if design award winners are perceived as more effective and professional? Well, so what is that ultimately you get a higher conversion rate on your new customer sales. Cool? So don't worry, I'll share this slideshow with you guys so you can actually take a look at this. I won't keep just walking through these exact questions here, but I wanted to give you guys an idea of some of this stuff because I could kind of hear the gears turning and feel the gears turning. Okay, so here's another example of the questions that I write around benefits. And remember, here's the ultimate thing that matters. The ultimate thing that matters here is that we're asking amazing questions of our prospects that cause them to think more deeply about whatever it is that they're doing and whatever it is we're asking them for, right? So the whole reason that I've been talking you guys through this exercise is for one simple reason. We're trying to arrive at great questions to ask in our sales conversation. So the process is we're listing features, we're listing benefits, we're asking ourselves, so what? And we've done all of that so that we can finally get to the place where we can write an excellent question about that. So the feature is that the website's completed in 3 months. The benefit is that there is a big ROI on dollars invested quickly, right? So then what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to ask myself, what is a question that I can ask of my prospect that exposes whether or not this particular benefit applies to them, right? Because I'm trying to get them to tell me things. Since I can't convince anyone of anything, I need to ask questions to get them to see things for themselves. So that's what I'm doing here. So because the benefit is that they can see ROI and dollars quickly invested, I might want to ask them a question about what's the most important thing about the timing of your new site launch, right? It's a question that I wrestled with, but ultimately this question will expose whether or not this benefit is important to them. Okay, here's another benefit example. Design award winners are perceived as more effective and professional. That's a benefit. Then I ask myself, so what, right? So what? Higher conversion rate on your new customer sales. So I'm trying to now think of a question that will expose whether or not this benefit is something that my prospect cares about. And the question that I came up with for this one is, how will innovative design affect the way your customers perceive you? Right? So that question is going to expose to me whether or not they give a shit about design, whether or not they give a shit about higher conversion rates on customer sales. Okay. Here's another benefit is actually we have 24/7 customer service in this example. That's a feature. A benefit is that you've got hands-on assistance available to ensure that you get help you need on the big launches. Okay, that's the benefit. So the question that I came up with to expose whether or not my prospect cares about that benefit is, what would happen if there was a problem in the middle of the night during your launch? What would you do? What would that be like for you? Right? So that's the question that exposes whether or not the fact that we've got 24/7 customer service matters to that person. Okay? So these questions, I didn't just come up with them on the fly. I walked through the process, listed features, listed benefits, asked myself, so what? And then once I had the benefit, I thought, how can I provide value to my customer by asking them a question that's going to help me and them understand if they're going to be a good fit for what I do? Right? So the writing of these questions is a little bit of an investment of time, but that's why I do it up front. Right? I'm not going to come up with how will innovative design affect the way your customers perceive you. I'm not going to come up with what would happen in the middle of the night if there was a problem with your website during your launch. I'm probably not going to come up with those on the fly, which is why I'm walking you guys through this exercise, because if you want to ask these types of questions that really cut to the heart of the matter, that add value to your prospects by causing them to go into their brains and deeply consider a problem or an issue that they'd never really thought about, right? In order to ask those types of really smart and beneficial questions, you've got to do a little bit of that legwork up front. Because when you're just winging it on the calls, you're going to end up with average to mediocre questions. But I like to invest my time in coming up with 10 to 15 rock solid questions that I know are going to be a surprise to my prospects, because I'm going to see it in their faces and I'm going to see their gears turning. I'm going to see the fact that I've asked them a question that not many people answer or ask them, right? So not many people are asking them this level of questions, which is going to cause them to trust you, but more importantly, they're ultimately buying the person that best understands their problems. So if you're asking them the best questions, you're going to have the best understanding of their problems, and they're going to work with you. And that's why you can do idea extraction and pre-selling even if you have no expertise and you have no credibility, right? You don't need credibility. You don't need to have had a company for the last 10 years. The reason that you get credible is because you become the guy or the girl that asks the best questions, because the person who asks the best questions has the best understanding of the problems. And whoever has the best understanding of someone's problems, that customer will want to work with you regardless of your credibility and regardless of your track record. Okay? So this is the process to making the best possible list of questions that you can. And you're going to have to invest maybe an hour or two up front in this to build your list of 10 to 15 questions. But once you've got those 10 to 15 questions, then you're going to be able to bring the power to every single interaction, because you're not going to be asking mediocre questions that you thought of on the spot. You're going to be bringing them powerful questions where you've considered everything, and you're going to be able to get them to open up better. So that's why we invest time in building this list of questions up front before the calls, because it positions us as somebody who understands the business and can understand their problems. There's two types of questions that we're going to use. Okay? First question exposes bottlenecks, problems, or concerns. Okay? That's just something like, tell me about the most challenging part of the first 2 hours of your day. Or, what is the most challenging or time-consuming activity that you do every Friday in your business? Or, what's the hardest part about updating your financial reports every single month? Right? Those are questions that expose whether or not there's a problem or concern that exists. The second type of question exposes the impact of the problem. And here's how to know the difference really easily. Impact questions can start with the same thing over and over again. Impact questions start with, what would happen if? Or what is the impact of? Or what happens when? Or what are the consequences of? Right? So again, first type of question exposes bottlenecks or problems. So tell me, what's the most challenging part about the first 2 hours of your day? Right? And they say, well, honestly, the first hour of my day, Frank, I'm always spending it just reviewing my schedule and going through every single client to make sure that I've got an understanding of their file. Right? So that's the problem. The problem is that you spend an hour preparing for every single client. The way to expose the impact of that is to say, what is the impact of you spending the first hour of every single day spending time on something like that versus doing something different? Or what would be the consequences if you continue to spend the first hour of your day doing something non-productive like that for an entire year, right? What would be the consequences of that? What would happen as a result of you doing that, right? So ultimately, our job is to educate customers by exposing powerful impacts that they might not have ever considered, right? So this is actually one of a really powerful example. I coached a guy who's a financial advisor, and we wanted to think of a powerful question that he could ask them, right, that would cause impact, that would bring impact, right? So the challenge is, tell me about whether or not you have life insurance, and the answer is no, right? So that's a potential problem. So we want to understand the impact of that. So the way that we understand the impact is to ask an impact question. So, okay, here's the example, and it's really powerful because it cuts to the heart of the matter. And this is an example that I used in a financial advisor. So they don't have life insurance. So that simple impact question is, okay, you don't have life insurance. If, for some terrible reason, you passed away in the next month, what would happen to your family financially? Would they be taken care of? Right? So it's the most extreme example that I could think of, but it's a question that I actually coached a financial advisor to ask because it's so powerful. It cuts to the heart of the matter. It helps them see something that they might not have truly seen. Most people, right, if they're thinking about life insurance, they think, I don't know, do I need it? Do I not need it? I'm not really sure. But when you ask the question of, if you died tomorrow, what would happen to your family financially? All of a sudden it brings a different gravity to the situation, right? That's why some financial advisors make all of the money, and then there's a large percentage of financial advisors who make no money. They're differentiated by their ability to ask impactful questions and therefore educate their customer. Okay, so little example. First type of question exposes impacts. What's the most tedious part of this process for you? Right? So Michael, that might be a good idea extraction question. What's the most tedious part of this process for you? Second type of question, what will happen to your front-end sales goals if you continue to average conversion rates lower than 3%? Okay, that is impactful. You're asking them, remember the impact questions always start with what will happen if, what are the consequences are, what are the results of, that type of thing. So you can see here that this second type of question, it brings the power because you're differentiating yourself by asking questions that matter. Okay, so far what we've been talking through, you guys, is the playbook. Okay, so the playbook consists of this so far. So you guys can write this down. I'll also send you the slideshow. You're going to do some pre-call research. So your pre-call research is something that you're probably already doing where you want to understand all the situational information up front. This is general stuff like company revenues, like what the organizational hierarchy is. Anything that you can find out online, you want to find out online. Because if you can find it online, then it's readily available. So you don't want to waste your prospect's time by asking questions that the answers are on their website. Okay, so here's the playbook so far. Do your pre-call research. You use your prepared purpose trio, your three-layered purpose, to mentally prepare before every single interaction. Right? Then, we've talked about today, you propose and agree upon an agenda. Right? So you're doing your homework up front. You're making sure you know the things about that prospect that's readily available and out there. Second part, right? You're doing your prepared purpose trio before the interaction so that you're bringing the right mental frame into that interaction. Then you're executing a valid agenda, right? A valid agenda is something like, hey, we're going to have this conversation, we're going to ask questions, we're going to learn some things. At the end of the conversation, you're going to let me know one of things, either yes or no. Both answers are totally valid, but I would like us to come to that conclusion at the end. Does that sound fair? All right. Then what we're going to do is we're going to create a conversation bridge. Okay, and a conversation bridge is really, really simple. You're going to have your pleasantries before you actually get on the call, right? So you're going to have your pleasantries. Hey, how you doing? Oh, it's snowing here, it's raining here, cool. Here's a simple conversation bridge that I use in almost all of my calls. The very first question that I always ask, no matter if I set up the call, no matter if they set up the call, I tell you, like, if they sent me an email or I sent them an email, no matter what happens, the conversation bridge that I use that is powerful is, tell me a little bit about why you decided to get on this call with me. It's that simple, right? And usually, right, I'm the one that tracked them down, that sent them emails, that set up the time to talk, right? But I'm still immediately using that bridge of, tell me a little bit about why you wanted to take this call, because I want to set the frame of why are they here. I want to understand what's going on in their world that made me emailing them or me cold calling them something of interest at this particular point. Cool? So we've got pre-call research. We have the 3-layered purpose, which is our prepared purpose trio that we run through before every interaction. Okay? Then we've got our agendas. So we're going to deliver the agenda before every interaction, and that's going to guarantee that we're spending our valuable time interacting with people who are prepared to make a yes or no decision. And the fact that they're prepared to make a yes or no decision means that we're investing our time wisely, because they're either going to move forward with us or they're clearly going to give us a no. And a no is a good thing to us, because that means we don't have to waste any more mental energy with someone that we can't help, and we can immediately shift our energy to someone that we can help. Okay? Then we're beginning things with the conversation bridge, right? So we've got our pleasantries out of the way. They understand the agenda. They understand that we'd like a decision by the end of this. Then we're going to use the conversation bridge. And the conversation bridge is, tell me why you decided to take this call. No matter if I set it up, if they set it up, I'm always beginning my interactions with that so that I get things going. Okay, so we are at an hour, and I don't want to keep going down this path of baggage and BANT, because it's probably another 30 to 45 minutes of conversation. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually talk about this stuff in the beginning of next week's call. So what I wanted you guys to do is, I've got a form for you to fill out, and the form looks like this. Okay, so what are the ramifications of making the sales call, right? Why is it important to give someone the right to say no? I'm going to have you craft an agenda, right? So we just talked about how you actually craft your agenda, so I want you guys to craft an agenda. Then, right, I want you guys to go through the question building exercise, and that's the biggest thing that I want you guys to do, right? So you're going to write your agenda. You're going to write out services or features for your product. You're going to write associated benefits of those features, and then what you're going to do from there is you're going to write a list of questions for every single benefit and feature statement that you've got. So we're going to start with 3, okay? All you have to do is 3. You write 3 products features, you write 3 associated benefits, and then you write a question for each benefit statement that cuts to the heart of the matter. I can share this spreadsheet, or excuse me, I can share the slideshow. That way you guys can see some of the examples that I've got. I prefer to share the slideshow after you've already filled this out, because I want you guys to build up your mental sweat a little bit, and want you to try and work through this before I just give you the answers. All right, so people on the recording, after you've listened to this, you know that if you've got questions, if you've got concerns, if you need anything, email me, hit me up on Facebook. I'll make sure to make whatever you need clear. All right, so let me get back to you, Michael. Okay, so I am going to stop sharing my screen. And, oh, Jason joined us. Hey, Jason.
Hey, yeah. How you doing?
Good, man. When did you hop in? How deep in were we?
I hopped in about 40 minutes ago.
Okay, perfect. So you caught most of it.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Cool. So yeah, so I didn't want to. I really want to spend more time on the baggage and the BANT stuff, because that's stuff that's pretty interesting and pretty important. but I felt like with the agendas and the question building list, you guys kind of have your mental plates full as it is right now. So I want you to be able to go out there, write your agendas, write your benefit statements immediately rather than me overloading your brain with more information. So let me actually, I'll pull up the link. That way I can drop that for you for the form. And then you guys write, same thing like last week. Do you guys have any questions now? Drop you the form link in the chat here.
Yeah, I have a question. Just since I'm not selling anything yet.
Yeah.
How would you go about doing the list of questions, the features and stuff when I don't actually have a?
Which market are you in?
Commercial real estate.
Okay. Do you already have an idea of the problems that your people are having?
Not yet. I just started, so going into this market. So I've had 2 calls so far.
Cool. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to write a list of questions, but I want you to actually start with the question itself. Okay? So I want you to look at the examples that I've got you, and then I want you to actually write powerful questions without the feature and benefit.
Okay.
Okay? And it's a little bit of a different exercise, but ultimately, think about it this way. You want to ask people impactful questions that are causing them to think about their business in a slightly different way than they normally think about it. So really focus on those impact questions. But ultimately, like when you're building questions around something that you're not actually selling, you're going to have to take some guesses. So I might list out like 4 potential areas of improvement that a commercial real estate business could have, right? It might mean like 1 is financial accounting, 2 is scheduling, 3 is kind of guess, right? Create 4 different categories for yourself based on some of these conversations that you've already had, and then write questions based off of that. And actually, Michael, let me, I'm going to think about that a little bit more. I'm going to send you a specific exercise specifically for you since you're in idea extraction. So don't worry about that. Just kind of start thinking about it a little bit. But let me create a different exercise for you because I don't feel like the one that I just told you about is going to be as powerful as we need it to be. So let me just think about that a little bit, and I'll send you something in an email. You're going to have a different exercise than everybody else.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, I have 2 things. One building off of what we just spoke about. So, in that case where he's not selling anything, isn't this like almost like a process? So as he learns new things about the market, he just iterates over the benefits and over the list of questions, and he creates new benefits and new questions. The more and more he learns, is it pretty much like that?
Yeah, it's pretty much going to be an iterative process where you're kind of starting from nothing, right? So you're starting from essentially no benefits and no features, and then you're just going to grow those after every single idea extraction call. But I want to give you a better starting place than I have right now. So let me just kind of put something together specifically for that. That way you can have a good starting place.
Cool. And so my second question is, I was thinking, so the reason why these impact questions work, I'm assuming, or at least one reason, is because as a business owner, you're so caught up in your day-to-day that you don't take the time to think about questions like, what would happen if, for example, I don't have life insurance? Or what would happen if, what would happen if I die and I don't have life insurance? Or what would happen if X, right? So I'm assuming it works because they're not looking at they're so caught up in what's going on in the day-to-day operations that they're not looking at the things that could happen.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You're causing them to look at their business in a way that they don't look at their business at. So you're essentially, the way that I always talk about it, right, people wonder, how do I pitch people without pitching them? And the answer is you ask them these impact questions. So what you're doing through an impact question is you're educating your prospects, but you're not educating them by telling them something. You're educating them by asking them a question that makes them go and look at their business in a different way, right? So rather than tell them like, hey, did you know that you might want to go and look at this little thing in your business, because if you don't look at this little thing in your business, it might be costing you a lot of money, right? Instead of telling them that, you want them to be able to arrive at that conclusion, and the way that you do it is by asking them that impact question. So you've educated them, but you haven't actually told them. And ultimately, people value more what they conclude or request over what they told. So the whole goal with these impact questions is to show them parts of their business that they don't realize are going wrong without just coming out and telling them that.
Right. So I mean, so as an example, say you're in web design, you could. I'm just trying to make sure I understand because I came in a little late. So
yeah.
So one thing that popped into the top of my head was, we design mobile-ready websites. So a question could be, what happens if your site's not mobile-ready and you miss, 70% of traffic because people leave your site. 70% of the people that visit your site leave because it's not mobile-ready, and most people, 70% of people use a mobile device. Is that
exactly?
Okay.
So you might, right, going down that line, let's assume that they're really uneducated about the market, right? Mm-hmm. So you might ask them that in two parts. The first part is, do you know, Mr. Prospect, what percentage of people generally visit websites from their phone versus a full browser? Right? Mm-hmm. And they might say, no, I don't know that. And you might say, okay, no problem, right? That answer is 70% of people. Then you might ask them, what's your website like? Have you guys set it up for mobile? No, we haven't set it up for mobile. So based on those two questions that you've asked, now you're going to bring the pain. Now you're going to ask them, okay, so we just learned 70% of all website visits come from phone. We learned that you don't have a mobile version of your website up. So Mr. Business Owner, what is the impact to your business that 70% of people who visit your website are having a bad experience because they're looking at it from their phone, but your website is only optimized for a desktop? So what is the result of 70% of your website visitors having a less than optimal experience? What is the result of that to your business? What kind of impact do you think that has on conversion rates? How does that affect your perception in the community? Right? So really what we wanted to tell them was, you're crazy for not having a mobile website because that's really impacting your ability to convert more customers. But we can't just tell them that, so we lead them through a few questions like, did you know? What is the amount of traffic that comes from mobile or web? Then they say, I don't know. So we say, no problem, that's 70. Then we ask them, do you have a mobile-ready website? No, we don't. So now we say, okay, right now we know 70% of traffic comes from mobile. So, Mr. Business Owner, what's the impact here? If you've got 70% of people having a less than optimal experience, what does that mean for your conversion rate, and how is that going to play into you reaching your overall sales goals?
Awesome. Got it. Yeah, okay. So it literally is a step-by-step, step 1, step 2, step 3, okay. Well, how many other steps? But leading them to then say, okay, now that we know this information, what is the impact of whatever it is we're talking about? Okay.
Exactly.
Yep, I understand.
Cool. Any other questions, Michael or Jason?
Nope, I'm good.
No, I think I'm good.
Cool. Mike, let me get you a different exercise. I'm just going to think about that. I want to give you a good starting place. That way you can get the most benefit from this. But I dropped you guys the link there. So like I said, you guys, if you need anything, Facebook, email, I'm here to make sure that you guys are able to implement this information immediately.
Awesome.
Sounds good.
Cool,
Thanks.
gents. Thanks for getting on live. You guys are my live champions. Everyone else during the day, they tell me, oh, yeah, I think I'm going to be there. But you guys are my live champions, so I appreciate that. And recording champions, we'd love to have you live some week. But if not, we hope you enjoy the recordings. All right, guys.
Awesome.
Have a good one.
Let me know what you need. See ya.
All right, bye.